So we're now going to move on to China, and as before, we're going to have a short overview of the market, Chinese market, and to do that, Stephanie Galob, who is the ETC Head of Research. Stephanie.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Now we'll focus on the second emerging market that we have in the program today, and it's particularly the smallest market that we're looking at. But of course, China has attracted a lot of attention as one of the markets that has been growing the fastest over the last couple of years. Now, what does it mean actually for Europe? Over the past 5 years, Chinese arrivals to Europe doubled between 2010 and 2014. And again, in 2015, Europe is expected to record almost 11 million arrivals from China, which is actually another increase of 30% that comes even despite the concerns about the slowdown of the Chinese economy in recent years. Now, in terms of the market share, it has to be noted that the share of the Chinese market in European inbound travel has been growing steadily over the last couple of years, but it's of course at a smaller value than other markets. In 2015, we expect that the Chinese market represents around 2% of total inbound travel to Europe. Now, in terms of the dispersal of Chinese arrivals within European sub-regions, it is very clear that Chinese arrivals are mainly focused in Western European destinations, where especially France actually records almost a quarter of Chinese arrivals in Europe, followed by Western destinations in, for example, Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. So 4 destinations from Western Europe in the top 5 European destinations. The second region that is important within Europe is, of course, Central and Eastern Europe, especially attributable to Russia as a neighboring country of China. Smaller numbers are being recorded in Southern and Northern Europe, whereas here, specifically between 2015 and 2020, the largest relative changes are to be expected. So there is a sort of more dispersal of Chinese travel, especially within Southern Europe, for example, to Spain or also to Turkey. Now, what are actually the expectations for the Chinese market for the next 5 years? So despite actually the slowdown of the Chinese economy, it is expected that the middle class will further expand and, of course, fuel more international travel. So total China's outbound travel is expected to accumulate to almost 85 million international arrivals worldwide, followed by then, of course, the share of outbound long-haul travel. Now, it needs to be noted that long-haul travel actually from China is expected to grow at a slightly faster pace than total outbound travel from China. In Europe, Europe is actually thought to be a pace in terms of the relative changes, and the region will record some 12 million Chinese arrivals in 2020, holding its market share at roughly 14%. Thank you.
Very good. Now, I'm going to follow the format of earlier on. I'm going to introduce our 2 panel members here to talk about China. First, Xiao Fang, who heads up one of the leading Chinese travel agents in the UK. Her company, Business Horizon, formerly Newland UK. And in 2014, she and her team successfully organized the first UK-China Business Leaders Summit, which had approximately 150 delegates from around China in attendance. And of course, that experience made it possible for her to work much more recently with the Chinese embassy on the logistics management for the Chinese state visit to the United Kingdom. Qing Li founded Kaiser in 1993 in Hamburg. This is a company involved in tours, operation, and management of wholesale travel, with 33 branches in cities across the world, Europe, North America, beyond. And she tells me hers is one of 2 private enterprises in the Chinese travel sector. So, perhaps Chow, I can ask you to speak first, respond to what we've just heard, and anything else you'd like to say.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. As a travel agency in London, and we've seen a lot of changes in the Chinese outbound market. And firstly, in terms of the business travel, as probably you know, we cut the budget of business travel a lot. And the budget has been controlled strictly, especially for civil servants in China. The accommodation is now 160 per room per night in the UK, and also the maximum dates is 6 days now, rather than as long as they can stay. And for the leisure tour, the number of independent international travelers has increased a lot. Chinese tourists, they tend to travel independent rather than with a group. And also, they like to book their accommodations through internet, especially mobile apps. So about 53% of Chinese international tourists, they booked their all packages online. This is particularly popular to young people, especially people aged younger than 33 years old. Also, the third thing is the importance of tour operators of Chinese tour agents in China has been weakened. So a lot of travel agents, they try to find another way to deal with this, the market change. For example, our company, we started our business 10 years ago, and our main business was business travel. But as the budget has been lowered down quite a lot, so we changed our strategy to executive training and incentive tours. That's why we successfully worked with the Chinese embassy on a state visit this time. And I think the European EU has done a lot, put a lot of efforts in welcoming Chinese tourists to Europe, in terms of visa application and also the payment terminations. And also last week during the state visit of Chinese President Xi, the Prime Minister of the UK, David Cameron, just announced they will extend the UK visa from 6 months to 2 years, and also it's a multi-entry visa. And also the British government is planning to introduce the 10 years multi-entry visa to the Chinese tourists as well. I think it's good news for us as we are working in this industry.
Okay, so this is hot news you're giving us. This is David Cameron's announcement. So it's going to be much easier for people once they get a visa in China to come to Europe, well, to Britain, but I'm assuming that other European countries have always been a bit easier, I think, because of Schengen. But it'll be easier in future, you're saying?
Yeah, it's going to be much easier.
Okay.
And also, the British Embassy in China will introduce more fingerprinting services to additional 50 cities in China. Right. It was only 9 cities. So it will make more easier for Chinese people to apply for a visa as well.
Very, very interesting indeed. In so many ways. Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to you in a second. Jim, would you like to say what you'd like to contribute?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for coming. And my name is Jane, coming from Kaiser Touristic. As Tony briefed the introduction, as the company has been founded in 1993 So in Hamburg, actually, which is one of the main majority city traveling destination in Europe. And during the last 22 years, I would say, we have successfully, bring the Chinese people, the visitors across the whole world. And within the UK, we are the UK branch who dealing with destination management company. We are the destination company. We had the Kaiser company from Beijing delivered more than 10,000 visitors during the last 10 months. Now, even I didn't even count the rest of 2 months. Even it's counted by the off-peak time. So the 10,000 visitors from China, from Kaiser actually. And to the Europe, the whole Europe is more than, during the last 10 months, we had 120,000 visitors from Kaiser, not from the whole country, from Kaiser. So just two figures, I'm just spread out, really large amount for the potential growing in the Chinese market. And as mentioned, Kaiser is one of the, actually it's this month, this month, we are the private enterprise, has been the listed company in the Chinese stock market. So it's really, in terms of the leisure groups or business groups, business travelers from China, that was we can see it is potentially growing every single year, and is sustainable and potentially growing. Yeah, I think if you...
Okay, great. Perhaps I can just open up by asking either or both of you. I mean, what do... because I'm assuming that, as in all tourism markets, there are people who've travelled or they've been students overseas and they go back somewhere where they've studied or been visited before. But China will have a larger number of people, correct me if I've got this wrong, who are travelling abroad for the first time or have travelled perhaps less than, say, America. It's a very rapidly growing market because of the extraordinary success of the Chinese economy in recent years. With that in mind, I mean, what do you detect people see as the incentives and what are the barriers about Europe? What are the things they think that really attracts us? And what are the things that are, problematic?
I think the most charming thing about Europe is about history, heritage, as we mentioned before, to other markets. It's the same to China. And as you know, China has a very long history, and they shared a lot of things in common with with European history as well. And also the literature is very popular in China. So Chinese tourists want to go to these countries to see the architecture, to see the places that are very famous, and they haven't been before. And this is the most attracting thing. And also secondly, recently, Chinese tourists like to go shopping in European countries because they can have the VAT refund, and also the price is cheaper in European countries. But now, as I heard from my clients, this has changed as well. Luxury markets in China has declined because of the government is dealing with the corruption, right. And the market is now very good as before, and the price has gone down as well in China. So the luxury products in European countries is only like 15% less than in China. So it's not the main appealing things to Chinese tourists. In terms of the barriers, in the past, the language is the main barrier. But now, as I said, we've done a lot and put a lot of efforts in. So in the hotel, some hotels has a Mandarin-speaking receptionist and also sales. And also in shopping malls, we introduced a lot of Chinese sales assistants to help them with these things. And I don't think language is the main barrier. The barrier would be like the culture difference between two nations. So maybe Chinese tourists, they don't understand the way we are dealing things here. Most of things I've met is my clients complain that if they want to experience Western food, go to Western restaurants here, but they said that the whole procedure is so slow. It's a waste of time for them, and they got very busy schedule, very tight schedule. So this will
be such pain, particularly for French people in the audience, who even we in Britain are embarrassed by the way in which we eat fast compared with the excellent, wonderful way in which France does eating and civilization.
Yeah.
So that is so. Does that suggest that? But is that something that you think Chinese people over time would come to appreciate, the more French style, or that people providing services for Chinese tourists in Europe need to get a move on? I mean, which way round, or a bit of both, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating thing about cultural differences. And in the past, Chinese tourists don't understand at all. They complain. But as time goes by, they come to the European countries more, and we market these destinations more to them. This market has been educated, so they can understand why we're doing things like this, and they can enjoy and appreciate the way we done here. And I think it's a fascinating thing to them as well. And if they go traveling around the world, the most important thing is get to know the destination and get to know the ways people doing things here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think, I mean, the point I make about France is a serious one indirectly, because I think, the Europeans traveling to each other kind of know these things are different as well, and kind of like them because they're different at some level. And I think the different approach to eating from country to country, families in some, not in others, is intriguing, I think, to people with an open anybody with an open mind. Anyway, Jing, would you like to sort of give us your best and worst?
Just follow up Charles' point, regarding the food. Actually, something in my mind. Always I heard my suppliers or the hotel asking me, would you recommend the Western food for your group? Because I'm dealing most of the leisure groups. I'm saying one fish and chips, that's enough. Even Mr. Xi has a fish and chips. So, and really, we, not only the Chinese people trying to understand the Western, the whole Europe's history or background, the people from European country, we might trying to understand the Chinese habit or the lifestyle, because of the past, I think 50 years start from 1949, the traveling market, tourism market in China, only this couple of 10 years, only 1 decade, I think, is rapidly growing. You wouldn't see the Chinese people who are traveling to 50 people or 40 people during the peak time before 20 years. So just during this decade, and people, bear in mind, we never stop having the first time traveling to the Europe. We have the very large population, the big one. So people always have the first time experience to traveling to Europe. So we might understand the Chinese people, what they're thinking about, what they're trying, what they like to eat. They're willing to have a Western food in the hotel, but what taste? Fish and chips, and the other one is what? So we might understand each other, and we just have the barriers out. We have no barriers.
Yes, well, not quite sure what to say about fish and chips, but still, I'm sure somebody else will. Right now, anybody like to ask a question or pass a comment or some thoughts on what we've heard, both in terms of the presentation and from our two speakers? Yep, we have one here. Yeah.
Hello, good evening. My name is Enrique. I am the director of a travel agency in Spain, and we offer some tours in Europe. And the first one is to visit football clubs in Europe. I would like to know how famous is football in China. Thank you.
Oh, the only thing I know is Mr. Xi really like football. Yes, and another point I make, in 2016, Manchester is the other one, rather than Heathrow and Birmingham, is the third airport direct flight from Beijing to Manchester from 2016. So Manchester United is the only one Mr. Xi who visited during his visit in the UK. So very much like it. And I think am I aware we have the, because we are the one, our big shareholder is Hainan Airline. And they had the sponsorship with Spain and what team, sorry about that, and with Manchester United and Manchester City as well.
So just to ask the question back to you, you're effectively saying football is for and of itself an attractor, potentially. Yep. I mean, clearly Spain has incredibly famous football teams as well. And you're saying that works in bringing people to Spain, for and of itself.
We will visit the cities of Manchester, London, Madrid, Valencia, Barcelona, Milan, and Munich.
And what do people want to do when they get there? They want to visit the ground, or they want to...
Yeah, the ground and the museums.
And the museum.
The history of the clubs.
And of course, I almost said this when our Russian guests were here a moment ago. A number of the clubs actually, of course, belong to Russians as well. So you can touch a bit of Russian culture as well in Britain while you're here. What about football? And Chao, what do you see as football? Because it is clearly a massive potential growth at both ends, isn't it? Football's growing in China, and here's an opportunity both ways.
Yeah, football is very popular in China, and a lot of tourists come to the UK or Spain just to watch football games. And we found it's quite tricky that, especially in peak season, it's very difficult to manage to get a ticket for them. And it's always like we purchase hospitality packages from the third parties and then sell to our customers. This is one thing. And the other thing I want to mention is football academy is growing rapidly in China as well, especially for juniors in China. We worked with some schools here and brought Chinese students to the UK. They had the language classes in the morning, and afternoon they have football trainings. And I think it's a way that in China, not only the tourism industry and the tourism industry in China has broadened to like education, executive trainings, and also summer schools, and also a lot of other opportunities. And football is one of them.
Okay, great. Okay, that's really, really cool point. Over here, there's a hand over here somewhere. It's quite dark.
Yeah, hi.
Oh, up there. Sorry. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. You're probably here anyway. This morning during the meeting, we were discussing events for 2016, and we were discussing the possible chance of going to China. And one of my colleagues said, would that be for commercial reasons or for training reasons? And one of the points that came up is we go to China as Visit Britain, or we go to China and knocking on doors selling. And many of the other European countries independently, so you would have the French Tourism Board, then the next week the German Tourist Board, and the next week the Italian Tourist Board. And so when you go along to see them, the bosses are very unlikely to give you much time because of all these people visiting. So do you think it would be a good idea for us to go as Europe to train the staff about Europe, the frontline staff, the people that are selling the tours and on the phones?
So would Europe be a more efficient way, and would it make sense? I mean, because the point is that individual countries, though they're here represented as Europe, often do these things individually. But would it be more efficient and more effective if Europe went as a bloc?
I think it's a good idea. And we've attended a lot of tourist promotion and the conference in China that a lot of different tourism bureaus and associations attended there to introduce the products and the destinations. And secondly, I think, did you mention to train the sales people in China from the travel agency? Yeah. I think it's another good way to educate the people in the sales team. If they have good knowledge about the whole destination, it's good for them to sell the products, and also it benefits the European as a destination. Yeah.
But I mean, to put the question back to you, I mean, if I've understood this right, I know less about this than any of you, so take this as, if it's a stupid question, forgive me. I mean, knowing a great deal about in one country is quite difficult. Knowing about all of Europe, if you're trying to promote it, would be quite a big thing to do, wouldn't it? However well trained people were.
I think it's understanding how small Europe is. And
well, it's sort of big and small, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
It's sort of both. But you know,
I think what I'm trying to say is their valuable time. They're on the phones and on the front desk selling what they sell, and what they will sell is what they know best. So if the Americans have been there and they've done a great job on selling America, or they've been lucky enough to go on a fam trip to Thailand or Japan, then that's the things that they will sell first because they feel more confident to sell. So what I'm saying is we need to give them the education to sell Europe, so that when those people are coming on the phones or at the desks, they feel confident to sell it. One of the problems I find is because we're all going individually,
sure.
The bosses just don't give that time. So we need a more, if you want to sell Europe as a whole, I think it should be...
and you're convinced Europe as an entity is a saleable entity as a starting point?
Yeah, I think it's sellable because...
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah, I think it's sellable because I believe the Chinese will have several holidays. So they will come to the UK, and they are one of the major customers who come to the UK and they explore the whole of the UK and Ireland, not just London and then go to Paris and then what have you. And then I think they will take another holiday for France and, say, Germany. Then they will take another holiday for over several years.
Great. Okay, I think we're all agreed on that. Great point. And the question right in the middle here, so as difficult as possible to get the microphone to.
Good afternoon, ni hao. We had the opportunity to welcome the first flight of Hainan Airlines in Belgium in 2006. I'm in the restaurant business. I come back from Benjling last week. And there is one point that is surprising me. It's not the food. I like your food. Thank you very much. It's the way that doing business with you is challenging and with success. But there is one point I would like to have more explanation. Why, in comparison with other travel operators, the Chinese still have the use to go with the driver? It's the driver who is sometimes, more of the time, decision maker for the food and not the tour operator. And Belgium has also typical Belgian food to offer to a traveler, and how can we better work on that topic?
So just to check I've understood
Yes.
this right, you're saying drivers are making
Yes.
power decisions about eating?
Exactly. We are not Michelin restaurant star.
Yeah.
We are a typical Belgium popular restaurant, and it's still the driver who influence the business. And most of the audience here is selling or buying beds, meals, service, canal cruise, etc. And for the food, we feel that the market in China is in the decision, or the decision maker is the driver.
Right. Now, this is obviously for the non-independent traveller. So were those who are in the hands of their driver on a tour of some kind, inbound tourism, is this something either of you feel you have a view about? It's an interesting question.
Are you talking about the leisure group? Most of the leisure group, the big, the 40 or over 40 travelers?
Yes, I have been to your company last week as well on a sales trip.
My company?
Yeah,
Oh.
Paris.
Oh, great, thank you.
So it's for the mice, it's the local operator who take care of that. We do business here with the local operator who handle all the business. But for the leisure, and you have some special high-level leisure group, it's still the driver, the tour leader of the group who make the decision. So you see on the program, you have food, you have a meal, include, but we don't know where. And it's not focused on your company, it's focused on the Chinese market. We feel I have some people working in the same business in France and in England, and they have the same opinion.
Okay.
I think maybe, are you talking about driving guides? Yeah, probably. Because the driving guide, as for our company, they took the group around, and maybe, and he's the person who booked the restaurants for the guests. Because as you said, Chinese tourists working with Chinese tourists are very challenging because they always change their mind and they like to be spontaneous. So the driving guide will decide on the day what kind of food they want to eat. So they just book the restaurants themselves. But it's not a big deal for us. Sometimes if they want to have a special meal, we pre-book a good restaurant, Michelin restaurant for them. If on the day they just want to be spontaneous, we hand over this to the driver.
Sounds like you're up against spontaneity here, and the desire to be. But are you worried because it's completely unpredictable, or because suddenly a large number of people appear all at once, or a bit of both?
We can manage that.
You can do with a large number of people.
We have the experience for more than company for more than 1 century, and we are the example of the Belgian food we promote abroad. So the boss, it's family business. The boss is really believing in new market. We collect the first groups, so we make money with the country, but we feel that instead of other countries in the program, they say meal, they don't say Belgian meal, including that. And it's not, so we are offering something special. If
Yeah.
Italian, I can promote Italian food in a very popular place, Milan or Rome, etc. But we see in all the program that they say local food, but they don't say in that restaurant or in that.
Okay. I mean, this sounds to me like something that probably, I don't know, I'm kind of like it, a committee meeting it needs to be picked up and discussed in some slightly more micro forum. No, it's a good point. I'm saying it sounds like something where a small change could lead to a big change, I think, and that's what it sounds like. And in a forum like this, we can start off a discussion, but it probably needs to be picked up and handled in slightly more sort of official way, a sort of processy way. But great question. Now we'll take one more, then we probably ought to move on if we're to keep to our. We've got a couple of questions. Or two, then we'll take two. Take them together. One, then two.
Mario Bodini from Jack Travel. I believe that most of the Chinese tourists that come to Europe are traveling in groups, but some of the biggest OTAs are Chinese, Ctrip, Tuna, and so on. Do you believe that Chinese consumers are ready to start booking Europe online?
I
thought
think
you said they were booking up.
Yeah, as I said, a lot of it's a trend in China, and OTA has become super popular to Chinese tourists. But as a destination management company, we don't believe it's going to take over the local tour operators, because what we are selling is our services. We know the destination, we have the knowledges, and we can deal with emergencies. And this online tourist the websites, they couldn't deal with that. They have consultants, but they never been to the UK or European countries. And I think that's our main selling points and our core strength at the moment. And the other thing is they are marketing themselves. The OTA is the price. We don't compete with the price. We compete with the good quality of the services. And I don't think it's a trendy thing in China, but it's not going to take over.
I think I agree with what you're saying, but do you think that the market is moving away from a groups of market to an FIT market for Europe?
I think that's likely. That's likely. So they tend to travel independently, and especially for younger groups of Chinese tourists, they have a little bit language. They can speak English, and they can do research online. They get more knowledge online, and they can just book the whole package online.
They are becoming more independent.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And we'll take one final point, that we probably should move around the world a bit further.
Hello, there's been talk about training Chinese on Destination Europe, but do you think that we should also be trained on how to welcome Chinese visitors to Europe?
Exactly.
And is there any way we can actually get this information from, because of the cultural differences? I mean, it's not so bad when you've got Russian tourists, about the same, and same with the Americans, but Chinese is completely different culturally.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. Just like the gentleman was talking about the front salespeople, we absolutely. I know that Visit Britain organized the farm trip. Every company, organized a farm trip for the Chinese salespeople to come across the UK or the European country to feel what the visitors feels like. Because they might never have a chance to be in the UK or across the Europe country, and how they would to sell to the other visitors. Exactly the opposite way as well. We might, like as I said, we might trying to understand the Chinese people are thinking. So we have the experience, the history different. We don't, just Google it. What the Chinese people now, the lifestyle now. So we might just maybe go to China to feel what they living now, what they want, what they were expecting.
Is there anything that we can actually receive, either online or any publication, that will help us to understand what Chinese tourists want when they come to Europe?
For me, it's really, I think it depends. Like the people has different age groups, and they might have the different experience or the different expectation. We all know about the gaps in the marketing, so we just squeeze down the gaps and just mind the gap, actually.
Sorry, can I just say something here? Because I know that the members of ETC down the front will be itching like this. ETC have actually been working on this very fact and started producing guides, and I'm sure we can send around to everybody who attends here today, working with colleagues, people who are experts in welcoming Chinese visitors. Because it's very true, we focus on how we sell abroad, but we also have to focus on how we welcome. And I think what will come out of today certainly is, even working with the Russian market, certainly working with the American market, there's a sort of a route there, a connection, whereas for some of us working with the Chinese market initially can seem very alien, just the way people coming over, and ETC have in fact, this is really, they have exactly what you're describing, the gentleman's describing here. We'd be very happy to share around that's an ongoing project, I believe, as well.
Free for downloading.
Free for downloading, there we go.
Free for downloading, get better and better. Very good. All right, I think it's a good positive moment to stop to thank our two guests who've been talking about China and to invite our next panelists and discussant who are going to talk about the United States. So thank you both.
Thank you.